Hello and welcome back to the Adventist School of Bible Prophecy. We are your hosts. I'm Theresa Murray.
And this is Troy Biggs.
And we talked a lot last week about the first prophecy in Genesis with the serpent and Adam and Eve. Troy, kind of give a little recap on that before we get into the next one. We got into the 490 years.
Okay. So basically we spent a lot of time talking about the prophecies that point forward to the coming of the Messiah, Jesus. And the very first Bible prophecy was concerning the coming of the seed of the woman. And then we went to Daniel chapter 9 and took a look at the prophecy that pointed forward to the actual time in which Jesus would arrive here on earth as the Messiah and the work that he would do. Also, we talked about how God uses symbolism and things that we are familiar with to help us to understand, like the woman representing the church, the serpent representing Satan, and the seed obviously representing Jesus.
Yes, so now, as he promised, we're going to be getting into the next prophecy. So open your Bibles up to Daniel 2 or flip them onto your phones, however you check out the Bible so you can follow along with us.
So Daniel 2 has a lot of information in it. It has both a story and a prophecy. And I encourage you to read the entire chapter, but our focus today is on the prophecy itself. And the prophecy in Daniel chapter 2 actually begins in verse 31. But I would like to go back a few verses to the introduction to the prophecy and just kind of do a quick overview. So verses 26 to 30, Theresa, give us the interview, the meeting of Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar as Daniel comes before him, prepared to give not only the interpretation of Nebuchadnezzar's dream, but the actual dream itself. Because Nebuchadnezzar had had a dream, he couldn't remember what it was. But God revealed it to Daniel, and then Daniel shared it with Nebuchadnezzar and gave him the interpretation. Now, what we talked about last week was that we would talk about principles of interpretation. And that's the whole purpose of using Daniel 2 to kind of illustrate some of the principles of prophetic interpretation particularly as they apply to the book of Daniel.
And I really like this. It's the imagery, the symbolism in it is actually a little bit of a history lesson.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is.
People can get, I like the way that when he did the symbols, he gave the explanation. Mm-hmm. People don't have to guess what the interpretation is. Just read on and God will tell you. And then he, in each other successive one, gave a little bit more detail.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that actually is one of our three principles of interpreting and understanding Daniel's prophecies. So let's kind of jump into that. So to complete my overview of Daniel's prophecies, I've kind of broken it down I've broken Daniel 2 into 4 different chunks. We have the introduction, which is verses 26 through 30. Then Daniel, in verses 31 to 35, gives Nebuchadnezzar the actual dream that he had. And then verses 36 to 45, Daniel interprets the dream for Nebuchadnezzar, explaining the meaning of the different symbology in the metallic image. And then verses 46 through 48 is Nebuchadnezzar's response to Daniel's interpretation and how overwhelmed the king was by Daniel's interpretation and ability to reveal the dream to him.
Well, it was a ridiculous request.
Yeah.
There was no man alive that could tell somebody what they dreamed and what it meant. If you tell me what you dreamed, I'll give you an idea what it meant. But
Right, and that's part of the story that Nebuchadnezzar actually threatened death to all of the wise men if they could not tell him his dream and its interpretation. And they told truthfully. They said, "What you're asking, King, is absolutely ridiculous. No one has ever asked someone to do that." But Nebuchadnezzar, he remained firm. But God came through and revealed it to Daniel and his three friends.
before you go on, can I interject a little thing right now?
Yep.
I want to say and point out that when Daniel prayed to find out what King Nebuchadnezzar dreamed, he didn't run around and talk to a bunch of people. He went back to his three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they prayed about it. And then God gave him the dream so that he could also give him the interpretation. So many people, and I was on, it was like a website that somebody had started for prophetic dreams. And they were running around, Daniel was the verse they used for their, reasoning. And they were running around asking, okay, I had this dream, what does it mean? And I jumped in and I said, if you're going by what Daniel did in his example, you would be praying to God. You wouldn't be asking all of us what your dream means, because who are we? I got kicked off that page, but I just wanted to let you guys know out there's a lot of weird stuff going on, a lot of spiritualism going on, and you're not going to find something out talking to other people. You have to go to God and pray, and I just wanted to point that out before we go any further.
Okay, very good. So let's go ahead and jump into our first of the three principles of interpreting Daniel's prophecies. And the first one, now I gave Theresa these, and I don't know if it's the same order that I gave them to her in, but I wrote down, number one, the prophecies of Daniel, Daniel 2, Daniel 7, and Daniel 8 in particular, they follow the same succession of kingdoms. So when we take a look at Daniel's prophecy, or the dream of the king of Nebuchadnezzar, here in Daniel 2, we see the interpretation. Let's go to that, verse 36. Notice what it says here. This is the dream. Now we will tell you the interpretation of it before the king. You, O king, are a king of kings. And in verse 37, the God of heaven has given you a kingdom, power, strength, and glory, etc., etc. Verse 38. And wherever the children of men dwell, or the beasts of the field, and the birds of the heaven, he has given them into your hand, and he has made you ruler over them all. You, who is he speaking to? Nebuchadnezzar. You are this head of gold. So he identified to Nebuchadnezzar that he, as the king of Babylon, was the head of gold. Not Nebuchadnezzar himself necessarily, but his kingdom, the kingdom that he represented, was the head of gold.
The Babylonian Empire.
Yes, the Babylonian Empire. And then he goes on, verse 39, but after you shall arise another kingdom, inferior to yours. And what kingdom rose after the Babylonian kingdom? Well, it was the United Kingdom of
Medo-Persia.
Yeah, the Medes and the Persians. And, of course, history shows us that the Persians became greater and basically absorbed the Medes over a period of time. And then the verse goes on. Then a third kingdom of bronze. And the kingdom that overthrew the Persian Empire, well, that was Alexander the Great's Greek Empire. So a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over the earth. And then verse 40. And the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron breaks in pieces and shatters all things. And like iron that crushes, that kingdom will break in pieces and crush all the others. And after the kingdom of Alexander the Great's Greece, that was divided after his death and lasted for a few centuries, there arose another empire, a crushing empire, an empire of iron. And that empire was?
The Roman Empire.
The Roman Empire, yes. And so the Roman Empire, which was a great empire in the standards of this world, and it lasted for centuries. it goes on and it says, verse 41, whereas you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. And Rome fell after many centuries and was overwhelmed and overthrown by barbaric tribes and other nations, and has never achieved the unity that it once had. Europe has always been divided. North Africa has always been divided. The Middle East divided. All the areas that were once under the authority and power of the Roman Empire divided.
Now, kind of explain too, Troy, that, okay, Rome was the legs of iron. They were the ones that crushed the Greek Empire. But then didn't Papal Rome come in and kind of crush Rome, because then it became more of a religious?
Well, there was definitely, and that's another aspect we can talk about, another principle, but this understanding that each empire was succeeded by the next, there wasn't necessarily so much of a crushing as it transitioned from pagan Rome to papal Rome, but more of it was much more subtle of a transition, but it was a clear transition nonetheless. The Roman papal system eventually took over in place of the rulership of Caesars, the rulership of the emperors, and the head bishop of Rome.
So kind of the beginning of church and state mixing.
Yeah, he became the head of the state. So yes, it became more of a religious, political power rather than just a secular power.
But like you said, they never achieved the unity that they had once had.
Right. Once Rome fell, there was a divided empire, and it goes on. Notice what it says. It says, "Whereas you saw the feet," verse 41, partly of potter's clay, partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. Yet the strength of the iron shall be in it, just as you saw the iron mixed with ceramic clay. Mm-hmm. And as the toes of the feet were partly of iron, partly of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly fragile, or in some translations, partly brittle. Just like iron is strong, but a clay jar, baked clay, very brittle, easy to break. Mm-hmm. And that's the area in which Rome ruled. That those words are true to this day.